over the last X years is repair and patch pipe. We have to bite the bullet and look at the question of replacing an aged infrastructure that is in some cases as much as 80 years old to be replaced. I need to point out here that there will be no spontaneous development in rural communities. Rural communities will only respond if there are plans for economic development in the rural communities. The legislative agenda, I will list 5 of them. You could discuss them another time. The legislative agenda, as we talk of construction and we talk of the budget, must begin with the passage of the new procurement legislation. We have been talking about it for more than 10 years. We must develop a new national physical development plan. Who knows, it might stop Kublal Singh from talking about arresting the project for the highway going south. We need to have that urgently, not last week, before that. We are hearing that we're getting this. We have been hearing that for the last 15 or 20 years. A national physical development plan. We cannot develop communities or even build roads if we don't have economic plans for the end of the road or the communities along the road. The next thing we have is that we have been playing since 1985 with the question of registration of engineers and architects. We do not have compulsory registration of professionals. And as we address the issue of construction, we must be guided by a cadre of skilled and competent personnel who are certified. The next thing that we must have is a national building code. We have been talking about that since the 1970s. We do not have a national building code. And when we are struck by a serious earthquake on 7 on the Richter scale or beyond, or a tsunami in the Gulf or nearby, then we will realize what we do not have. All we have to do is to remember the difference between the earthquake that struck and destroyed Haiti a few years ago, and not too long after, an earthquake struck 10 times as large, struck Chile. Haiti lost 250,000 people, and Chile lost 1,200. The question is, why? I suggest, and the literature suggests, one of the reasons is a building code. But not only that. It suggests a culture of disaster preparedness. And therefore I am saying we have been waiting for about 40 years for a piece of legislation that specifically addresses the question of disaster preparedness. So I am listing those 5 pieces of enabling legislation. Let us turn finally, in my remaining minute or two, to what I called the institutional framework that must be produced. I said earlier on that once upon a time, we had something called a productivity council. My recommendation is that it is essential for development. It is essential not only for construction, but for every sector. That we need a national productivity council that utilizes skills of people in the private sector and the public sector. Secondly, we need to have registration of contractors. Today we have only a partial list of contractors. We don't even have a list of small contractors. Thirdly, and one of the previous speakers mentioned this, and this is at the core of UTT's position. But I wish I might be speaking to the wrong people, but who knows? The figures are that less than 30% of our students in high schools who take the equivalent of CXC, O-levels, whatever it's called now and will be called, less than 30% of them do mathematics and one science subject. and an even smaller percentage are successful. We have to see the teaching of science and technology in our secondary schools as in a state of crisis. We cannot get out of the present situation without addressing that issue. Fourthly, we need to have, if, as I said earlier on, if construction is so important, why don't we have a national construction council where both members of the private sector and the public sector meet periodically to plan, to discuss the challenges and develop strategies. Japan did it, and many of the developed countries, or the countries that were underdeveloped and are now developing, have done. Fifthly, we need to have a research agenda, and this brings together the two main universities that teach engineering and science, UTT and UE. We have to address the question of a research agenda to facilitate construction. And finally, I said, training. We need to understand that our contractors, small and large, are not ready for any proposed expansion. Some of them might not like me to say that, but I've been saying it before, but I've done more than that. We have attempted to put training programs in place because we believe that the small and medium contractors in particular need to understand how to organize business and how to organize their work successfully. So I'm saying now, how come, if construction sector is so important, it remains so disorganized? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Sweet, for that interesting and thought-provoking presentation. At one point, I thought he was going to go into the question of who constructs in Trinidad and Tobago, the local contractors or the Chinese, the people who built this facility. It's a very provocative discussion, and I hope it is addressed in the question and answer session. We now want to shift focus a little and talk about food. And to address us on the subject and related issues is Dr. Rohanie Maharaj, who holds a PhD in food science and technology, specializing in food processing. She has her training and experience, or some of it, at the University Laval in Quebec, Canada. Her research specialization is in the area of post-harvest biology and technology, including the storage and preservation of tropical fruits and vegetables. She's currently employed at the University of Trinidad and Tobago as an associate professor in the biosciences, and she is also learned and experienced in agriculture and food technology. She is currently a member of the Food and Beverage Industry Development Company under the Ministry of Trade, Industry and Investment. With pleasure, I give you Dr. Rohanie Maharaj.
Thank you, Professor Ryan. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and all protocols observed. It is indeed a great pleasure for me to be able to present and give my views on UTT's response to the Budget 2013, coming from the food and agriculture perspective. Now, the government has indicated that economic diversification away from oil and gas is key to sustainability of our economy. Agriculture is one of the pillars of diversification. $1.3 billion has been allocated to the development of this sector. Now, while our Minister of Finance did not elaborate on the plans and initiatives as it pertains to this sector, it is important that the details be reviewed to see how these initiatives are aligned across the various ministries for connectivity. A performance review from the previous fiscal package would have enhanced the current budget and given assurances both in terms of quality of output as well as value for money spent. The new budget for agriculture contains some key initiatives that could spur growth in this sector, and I will summarize my thoughts on these under 6 themes. The first one, the goal of reducing our food import bill by 50% in the next 3 years to achieve food security is indeed very ambitious and an admirable goal, but very challenging. For those of you all who don't know, our food import bill is approximately 4 billion TT dollars on an annual basis due to our dependence on imported food items, including the staples and grains, which account for 20% of our food imports, and which we don't produce nor manufacture. And even some of these grains that we import are inputs for the local dairy and poultry industries. Many of our local manufacturers, they use foreign suppliers for their raw material inputs. And even the bulk of our food bill consists of value-added products, which again are procured from foreign suppliers. So it seems that a lot of what we consume is really foreign. So the National Food Production Action Plan 2012-2015, this is it here, developed by the former Minister of Food Production, Minister Vasan Bharat, through consultation with the farmers and other agencies. This was really the means to achieve food security. This plan was focused on measurable outcomes for really the first time, in that we had specific crops, specific targets, and specific timelines. And I believe we must implement this plan, as it is the launching pad geared at achieving, delivering these targets, as well as achieving our food security. On the second issue related to the temporary removal of VAT, while in the short term, the removal of VAT on the food items may reduce the price of food, it provided that really the benefits are passed on to the consumer, and you have to pay attention to that. But we also need to better understand how these benefits would redound in the agriculture and agro-processing industries. We need to be mindful that the alignment between local agro-processing, employment creation, and sustainability of our own industry. And it probably would have been prudent to be selective on VAT so you don't put stress on local manufacturing. For example, we could have removed VAT on the local raw material components for manufacturing, because we have to pay VAT on that, and take it away from the locally manufactured goods. But we should have been careful in removing it on some of the foreign food items. And we could have paid a little more attention where the focus on the foreign food items could have been, removing VAT for critical items that impact elderly, children, right? And particularly the low-income persons. On the third point that I want to touch on briefly is with respect to boosting local agro-processing through the state agencies, giving out of the lands and the labor issues. We really have to get our marketing and infrastructure right to create the enabling environment for food and agriculture success. And state agencies like NAMDEFCO was set up to provide agribusiness and marketing solutions through the commercial partnerships with farmers and other stakeholders in order to produce high-quality primary products as well as value-added products at fair and competitive prices to selected markets. Now, in the budget, they mentioned the establishment of the Commodity Stabilization Fund, and I do believe farmers will be able to sell their produce to NAMDEFCO at fixed established prices, and this will be of a great support to them. Now, with respect to the distribution of the land leases for small and large farms, as well as the 2-acre plots to former Caroni employees, this is quite a noble task, but a more critical issue to be addressed is really the reform of state lands. We must review how these lands are allocated to ensure that those of the people who receive the lands do not abandon them or put a house on them. And a system needs to be in place to monitor and track the productivity of the small and large farms. We must use our arable lands, put the mechanisms in place working with the EMBD now under the Ministry of Housing to ensure the necessary infrastructure is in place. And we must ensure that priority for use of these agricultural lands is for agriculture and not housing. Right, Professor Sweet? We need to focus on this. Now, many of the farmers have been complaining. They have not been able to regularize their leases and are squatting, and they can't access the incentives that the ministry has to offer, or even the loans from the Agricultural Development Bank. There are over 8,600 families which are squatting. They are squatting on approximately 26,000 hectares of state-owned agricultural lands. We must regularize this. With respect to the labor supply now, as you all know, this is a major challenge to move our agriculture sector. And with the restructuring of the CPEP and the URP, it was noted that 150% allowance on salary payments will be provided to companies that employ these workers. However, there must be some kind of training and sensitization for these workers, as in the agriculture and agro-processing sector. There's a different work ethic as is accustomed to under CPEP and URP. The fourth point I want to touch on is with respect to the establishment of a food security facility with the government of Guyana. I truly believe that this will aid in reducing the cost of food. We all know Guyana has an abundance of land, and Trinidad and Tobago, we have an abundance of agro-industry competencies, and there's an opportunity for synergy. And the benefits of this partnership should be such that we can stabilize our food supply, and not only will it impact Trinidad and Tobago, and not only will it impact the economies of Guyana as well, but as for the region. So we need to think big and broad. And this initiative with Guyana can also be done in parallel while we continue to forge ahead in the local sector. One of the things that I want to point out is we have to be cognizant of the fact that we must upgrade our food laws and the sanitary and phytosanitary regulations, because currentently these laws prohibit importation of food, certain fruits and vegetables, and even meat products from Guyana, as well as many of our CARICOM countries. With respect to my fifth point I want to touch on, and similar to Professor Sweet, an area of concern is that there is no local content policy, right? There needs to be some kind of legislation to purchase some of the foods from local farmers, right? Government can do this because they are, in fact, a large purchaser of food through the school feeding program, through the prisons and army, right? So we need to ensure a local content policy, even for our restaurants. They must be encouraged to buy local versus imported food. And we need to link this local content policy with respect to our policy for health and nutrition in this country. The last point I want to touch on is with respect to youth in agriculture. Young people, they're not attracted to agriculture. Right, students? Yeah, right? And we need to expose these young people even at the pre and primary schools. And you can do this through the backyard gardening projects and tree planting exercise, where young people can get an opportunity to develop a love for agriculture. And we have really, when you look at it, we have an aging farming population. When Professor Thompson and we go out to the farms and we speak to some of the farmers in the cocoa industry, many of them are 70 plus old running estates. So we need to develop incentives for young people to pursue agriculture as a lucrative career option. So in summary, creating a food secure nation is one of the priorities of our government. And while we do realize that these are indeed challenging economic times, we must also realize that it is crucial for us to invest in food and agriculture, in which our future economy and food security will depend. UTT has a significant role in the development and stabilization of the agriculture sector in Trinidad and Tobago. And I don't know if you all know, but for many years at ECIAF, which is close to the Ministry of Food Production at Centeno, and now with the Biosciences, Agriculture and Food Technology program, we have played an integral part in the training and the development of human capital for the food and agriculture sector. And not only for Trinidad and Tobago, but also for the regions. Many of the students come from the Eastern Caribbean states. And our programs at ECIAF have a strong focus on applied science, technology, and entrepreneurship. So we at UTT, we are ensuring that we produce farm-ready and industry-ready graduates with an entrepreneurial spirit, as well as these students and graduates have the management skills to be able to add value to the sector. And how we are doing this, it's really through our practical and farm training programs, our incubator and internship programs, as well as the professional development programs in food and agriculture. We are looking at opportunities to work even more closely with our small and medium enterprises and even some of the state agencies to boost our research and development and innovation in agriculture and agro-processing. You must remember, our research agenda must be driven by adapting and incorporating what the industry wants into our program. And the private sector has a key role to play, because in many of the developed countries, it is really private sector that funds the research. And it is this investment in research is what will increase our competitiveness and our sustainability in the long run. So we also need to build on existing partnerships with related government ministries, and we can even assist with upgrading the Trinidad and Tobago food laws and regulations. We also need to forge new partnerships with the government of, and the University of Guyana in order to build capacity through joint training programs in food and agriculture. And I believe we need to encourage more public and private sector partnerships in agriculture. So in closing, while the budget does offer opportunities for developing the food and agriculture sector as a viable pillar for diversification of our economy, there is still need to really elaborate on and consolidate these agri-centric elements of the budget to develop a cohesive, practical implementation plan which can deliver these ambitious targets. We at UTT are committed to partnering with the government to provide impactful education and entrepreneurial initiatives for the development of the agriculture sector, all in the context of national development. I want to thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Maharaj, for giving us a lot to chew on. It is now my pleasure to invite Mr. Ravindra Jagannath to speak to you, to address you. He is in the field, in the area of IT, and he's also a management consultant. He's an ex-partner in charge of management consulting services at Ernst & Young, and was recently the CEO of the National ICT Company Limited. He was also the managing director of Esprit Consultants Limited. He has a master's degree in operational research and systems analysis from the University of Aston in Birmingham. Very experienced, he has over 30 years industry experience, including 25 in consulting at the senior and executive levels. He is a founding member and past president of the ICT Society of Trinidad and Tobago. He's also the current president of the Trinidad and Tobago Coalition of Services Industries, a body that supports the development of the services industry and the export of services. I gather that he is going to address us on the whole question of creative industries. If I'm not well advised, please forgive. Dr. Jagannath.
And what was omitted from that brief bio is that I am an ex-Naparima College student. Yeah. The topic I was asked to speak on today is really the creative industries, and really what is in the budget and what has been advocated, pronounced with regards to the creative industries. But I want to broaden my discussion, and largely because we need to. Some of the previous speakers have indicated the importance of particular sectors to the welfare of the economy, the agricultural sector, the construction industry. And we know the importance of the energy sector as well to the economy. We know this, yes, but is that enough to sustain us going forward? Is that enough to actually cause us to really generate the new levels of employment for students much like yourself when you actually get into the working sector? And the answer is not really. In that regard, what has been pronounced about the creative industry sector is actually a positive step. It is actually one of the non-traditional areas that has been explored by the budget, and the pronouncements is geared towards creating that industry in a more formal sense and allowing it to generate more employment. The issue then becomes the situation where the creative industries, and that's the broad umbrella indicated in the budget, it then starts talking about the film industry and focuses heavily on the film industry. So we have a dichotomy talking about the creative industry to improve or increase the amount of employment in the future, but focusing on the film industry, which is actually, by all means, in the near future for Trinidad, going to be a low employment area. So we got to resolve that. The government certainly has to do some work in that regard, but the notion of looking at the creative industries is a positive one. But we also have to look at some behavioral aspects here. One of the questions asked by Dr. Maharaj, really, how many people really are interested in going to work in the agricultural sector? And almost unanimously there was a negative response. And then I asked a question similarly with regards to the creative industries. How many of you all are interested in the creative industries? How many of you students are interested in the creative industries? And you will see a low level of response. But the creative industries has the potential to actually create a lot of opportunities for us going forward if we embrace it in a very holistic sense and if we embrace it in a very formal sense. The creative industries, and I'm sure the majority of you all here have participated in some form or fashion in the creative industry. Many of you all have played carnival, played in various bands or listened to calypsos or play steel band and so on. Yes, we are participants in that industry and so on. Why don't we move now to actually being the ones who create that industry and carries it to the next level? To do that, we have to actually do a lot more, put a lot more effort into that industry. We have to actually understand where that industry can go. We have to look at models that exist in other countries and see how we can actually leverage on this. And in that regard, I dare say that the budget falls very short. By focusing just on one aspect of the creative industry, it's a step forward, yes, but it's actually a very small step forward. We got to do more with the creative industry and actually look to capitalize on a lot of our innate abilities within the country, our culture. I mentioned the whole issue of the carnival and steel band and calypso and so on. We all know the potential of those industries, but we have not exploited it over the years. We need to actually look at this in a holistic way. We need to look at it and actually create products that will then grow the industry, that will actually impact upon other aspects. The carnival industry can actually impact positively on the tourism industry, but only if we take the carnival and actually create products that tourists will benefit from, but tourists will come to our country from. As it is right now, tourists will come to our country for carnival at the beginning of the year, and after that, that's it. And all of the tremendous energies that have gone in to create that carnival at the beginning of the year, February, March, as the case may be, is lost for the rest of the year. Tourists, from my understanding, will visit a country if they know that when they visit a country, they can actually see something related to an area of interest of theirs. If that is carnival, they will come to the country during the rest of the year, other than February and March, if they know that there is something that they can see or they can participate in that is related to the carnival, using steel band and calypso, etc. We don't have that in Trinidad, and for years we've actually talked about that, and that is really where the crossover between the creative industries and our carnival and our culture and so on can actually lead to benefit for the country. But what happens is that we participate in it and we enjoy it and we talk about it as the greatest show on earth. We'll talk about all our various cultures, the different religious ceremonies we have and so on. But nobody sits down and actually take this and analyze it and say, let's create some products and let's schedule these things during the space of a year to actually create something that other people will be interested in and will be willing to visit our country and enjoy the experience. And to use a simple example, a few weeks ago I happened to go down to the Temple in the Sea in Waterloo, and it's abysmal, the state of that